Something that occurred to me is that before today, I've never actually seen Rami angry before. I've seen him annoyed plenty of times, mostly at work, such as when he had to tell that one old guy not to unplug his computer for the 50th time. Even when he'd saved me from the churl, she'd just been a nuisance to him that wasn't worth getting mad about. Today was the first day I'd ever seen him get truly angry, and I don't wish to see it again anytime soon. The oldest of the journals hidden event details Matthew's time in the Marines. First few entries are nothing special, just him talking about military stuff, how much he can't stand the one commanding officer, and getting drunk with his brother, Ben. The very same brother whose head I delivered to his front yard. Rami, or more accurately, the body that Rami commandeered, is first mentioned on March 13th, 2004. I'm going to transcribe some segments of the journal directly, though I'll be removing the names of places so that these individuals can't be tracked. That being said, I am going to warn you all ahead of time. Matthew sucks. Ben hasn't been sleeping right ever since that battle outside of Redacted. Can't blame him. Some civilians were hiding out in a cemetery nearby, but we didn't know. Ben mistook one of them for a soldier. He was just some guy. Couldn't have been much older than us. At least he died quick. Medics said that the bullet went straight through his heart, killing him instantly. It sucks, but what are you gonna do? When I saw how flippant he was about an innocent person being gunned down, I honestly had to take a moment and pace around my room. He had talked about that man's death like how most people talk about traffic jams. Good lord. I tried to give the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe he'd just been in shock and hadn't known how to express how he was feeling. Clearly, Matthew wasn't much of a writer. Not that I have much room to talk. And he most likely wasn't thinking that anyone would read his private thoughts. Maybe the reality of what happened hadn't hit him yet. Or maybe I'm just giving him too much credit and he actually just didn't care. Once I calmed down, I kept reading. The talismans were mentioned for the first time when Matthew's unit captured the small group of Iraqi soldiers they'd been pursuing in the cemetery. The Iraqi soldiers had all been carrying wards with them. When they were confiscated, one of the soldiers made an ominous comment about how Matthew was going to need the talisman more than him. They must have known exactly what was coming. Matthew's handwriting became messy throughout the rest of the journal, as if he were frantically trying to get his thoughts out. I don't know how, but that man that Ben shot is back. But he isn't right. Ben, Douglas, Harris, and I were stationed with the Iraqi prisoners. It was my turn to stand guard at the door when I saw the reflection of something from far off. It kind of looked like when a coyote's eyes shine in the dark, so I thought it was an animal. I told everyone over the radio that I saw some sort of critter nearby, but otherwise I didn't think much of it. But then I blinked and the man that Ben had shot was just fucking there, standing right in front of me. Good to know I'm not the only one that's been jump scared by Rami. At least when he does it to me, it's just to say something bizarre. Or to make out with me. I've never been afraid of another person before, but this wasn't a person. I'm pretty sure that I met the devil that night. Why else would he look like that man? How else would he be able to do the things he can do? He had to have been here because of what Ben did. What we did. I held my gun in his face and warned him to back off, but he didn't give a shit. In almost perfect English, the devil told me to release the Iraqis. The guys inside with the prisoners heard me, and Douglas marched out like the dumbass he is. I swear to God, they let anyone go to military school as long as their daddies have enough money. He put his pistol to the devil's temple, but the devil never took his eyes off me, ignoring every word that Douglas said. The devil put one of his hands into a fist, then Douglas, along with everyone else in the camp besides the prisoners' tent, started screaming. Douglas dropped to the ground, sweat pouring off of him, twitching as white foam spilled out of the corner of his mouth. I opened fire. The devil didn't even flinch, not even when I shot him in the eye. And the whole time, he just kept staring at me. That's when I smelled meat cooking. I looked away from the devil just long enough to see the dark blisters appearing on Douglas's skin. Something stringy and white was oozing out of his eye sockets. His eyeballs melted. I don't know how, but I think the devil cooked him and everyone else in the camp besides us, from the inside out. I did not know Rami could do that. Goodness. It must be something he reserves for special occasions. Later on, Matthew wrote that he could never eat meat again because the smell reminded him too much of that night. Matthew and Ben ended up releasing the Iraqi prisoners, but by the time that happened, the brothers and one other person that had been in the tent with them were the only survivors. It wasn't lost on Matthew that the talismans had been the only thing keeping them from sharing the same fate as the rest of the camp. When it came time to explain what happened, naturally, nobody believed them. Matthew became especially paranoid, claiming in almost every entry that Rami was haunting him. Eventually, he was discharged on the grounds that he was mentally unfit. As a result, Matthew became obsessed with the talismans. Through his obsession, I've learned that the most effective talismans feature scripture from the Quran invoking the name of Allah and Muhammad. What's written seems to matter more than the material it was written on. Good to know. Years went by without incident for both brothers. Thinking that the jinn had given up on them, Ben took the wards off his doors. That very night, Rami found him, and I found Rami. So, what was the point of this? Why did he want me to see this? Slowly, I left my bedroom, glancing around warily. Matthew? I called out. Are you here? Hold on. Connie. Connie could see Matthew long before I did. The little goat was still in my bedroom, sleeping off her most recent bout of zoomies. I got her to wake up, but instead of being helpful, she just started bouncing around again. I honestly don't know what I expected. Matthew! Why did you show me this? I asked, loudly enough for my voice to echo off the walls. Out of nowhere, my confusion began to turn to rage that made my hands shake and my breathing go shallow. A violent, blood-boiling kind of anger that made me afraid of myself in a way that I have never been before. Fuck Matthew. Fuck him for destroying my home. Fuck him for continuing to harass me even after he died. Did you expect me to sympathize with you? Your brother killed that man and it meant nothing to you. Of course Rami came after you guys. You deserved everything that came to you. After that tirade, it's difficult to describe. I was trapped within myself. I could see through my own eyes, but it was like I was viewing the world from the backseat of a car. The person who wasn't me anymore seized my car keys and marched out the front door. Distantly, I could still feel pure, unadulterated rage, but now it felt more like a memory. From the backseat of my own mind, I watched the person who wasn't me drive off, ending up at Rami's apartment, slamming every door way too hard during this agitated journey. For a split second, I saw my reflection in the apartment complex's shining front door. Even though it was my face and my anatomy, I didn't look like myself. This person was hateful. You could see it in the way my teeth were clenched, the way his eyes glared out at the world. I couldn't think of this as me. It was not me. This wasn't who I am. How do I become me again? How do I get back to myself? How do I get out of the backseat before I hurt someone? The person who wasn't me charged Rami's door as if he meant to break it down, but it opened at the last second, sending him tumbling down. He rolled into the fall just as Rami went to pin him down. He managed to clumsily but successfully avoid the djinn. My mouth moved, but the words weren't mine. You don't want to hurt your little friend, do you? Rami's face and voice were frighteningly cold as he replied, Keep it down. My neighbors will complain. I tried to move or speak or do anything. I'm in here. This isn't me. Please don't hate me. Please. But when you're in the backseat, you're helpless, only able to sit in stunned terror as the driver yanks the steering wheel into a head-on collision. I wished I could stop myself or look away as the person who wasn't me wielded my car keys like claws, raking long scrapes across Rami's face. I'm sorry. Rami seized the false lab rat's wrist. Then, in one swift motion, he was on top of the imposter. Rami's voice was surprisingly gentle as he kept my body from thrashing. Hang in there, lab rat. The person who wasn't me snarled something so vile that I can't bear to repeat it. He used my face and my voice to insult Rami in such a personal, loathsome way that it genuinely tears me up to think about it. Please forgive me. Rami didn't seem to be affected by the awful things that came out of the false lab rat's mouth as his hand covered the imposter's eyes, uttering in Arabic. My heart. I could feel my own heart beating again. I focused on the rhythm in my chest like it was a lifeline. This was my heart, not Matthew's. More Arabic was whispered into my ear. As I held on to each word, even though I couldn't understand them, his words seemed to match every beat of my heart. The cool air in my lungs became mine again. I used it to say, I'm sorry. Rami didn't acknowledge me as he continued to bring me back into myself. My fingers twitched involuntarily. I tried to move them. They weren't mine yet. They clawed at Rami's arm. I'm so sorry. This time, when Rami whispered in my ear, it was in English. Get the hell out of him, you piece of shit. My whole body jerked as all my muscles contracted painfully at once. Rami held me in place. The rage that had consumed me before, the rage that wasn't mine to feel, began to slowly fade away as my body and I became one again. What was the first thing I did when I got control of my body back, you ask? I had a complete mental breakdown. Rami uncovered my eyes, his hand sliding to my cheek. I couldn't look him in the eye. I interrupted my own panic attack to apologize again. He assured me that I had nothing to apologize for. His thumb traced my cheek, reminding me that I was inside my own skin again. I was in control of myself. I focused on his touch, on my heartbeat, on my breathing. I focused slowly on feeling, appreciating that I was free. I was still me. It took some time, but eventually, Rami convinced me to get off of his floor. He guided me to the couch and I immediately slumped over, exhausted, but also bitter. Bitter that Matthew couldn't just rot in hell where he belonged. Would I be able to use one of my wishes to get rid of Matthew forever? I rasped. You could, but that would be like using a nuke to get rid of an ant infestation. Matthew was a weak, pathetic spirit. If I were you, I wouldn't waste a wish on him. There are much simpler ways to get rid of things like him. He certainly didn't feel weak when he hijacked my entire anatomy. Rami continued. Did you find any personal items in his house? The journals. That's why Matthew had wanted me to find them. This time when I felt anger stirring in my chest, it was mine. My exhaustion subsided instantly. I jumped off of the couch, snatching my keys off of the floor. Rami did a double take, then grabbed his sunglasses as he followed me out. The drive went by in a blur. Along the way, Rami explained that since Matthew had been exorcised, he was going to be weakened but desperate. We were going to be dealing with a cornered beast. I hope he's afraid, I said. I hope he feels as afraid and trapped as I did. If he doesn't already, he will, Rami promised. I didn't let myself overthink. I admitted. I read his journal. I learned a bit about you and Matthew's history. Did you really burn his entire camp from the inside out? I did. It's not something I make a point of doing. It's messy and takes some setup. After a brief pause, Rami added, Would you like me to demonstrate on Matthew? I think he missed out last time. Without hesitation, I told him that I'd love that. Maybe that was a side effect of the possession, but I didn't care. Fuck Matthew. I didn't want him just gone. After all that he's done to me, I wanted him to hurt. The journals were sitting where I left them on my bedside table. As I retrieved them, I heard the telltale sound of that piece of shit gurgling directly into my ear, just as he had the other night. Teeth clenched, I ignored him as well as the blood dripping onto my back from his destroyed jaw. On a lighter note, all of your tips saved my shirt from the other day, and I'm in the process of using the peroxide method on the clothes I wore tonight. So, thanks guys. My laundry has been rescued. Anyways, back to this bitch. Sorry. We got drinks after all of this was over and I'm feeling them. Can you blame me? With one of my knives in hand, Rami led me outside. The gurgle turned to growls. Then I was shoved roughly from behind. I was about to turn around because I'd had enough, but Rami stopped me. He's feeding off of your anger. Don't give in to it. I kept my eyes on Rami after that, ignoring the ruckus that the shitty redneck ghost was causing. Just focus on Rami. Fuck Matthew. He doesn't matter. One way or another, he was going to be gone in a few minutes. Even if I had to waste a wish to get rid of him, I'd do it. Rami cut his finger, drawing a symbol on the cover of Matthew's journals with his own blood. He smiled. That murderous, cold fury was still pulling at the corners of his eyes. When Rami spoke, his voice was eerily calm. You want to know what I did to your unit, Matthew? The sounds behind me stopped as Rami's thumb and bleeding forefinger slowly rubbed together. The djinn continued. Do you want to know what they felt? Rami's hand slowly curled into a fist. The cover on top of the journal suddenly flew open, the pages turning rapidly, then curling as they began to heat up. Matthew's gurgling abruptly turned into shrieks. The warped pages began to char, turning black, holes growing to consume them. The shrieks became more shrill. I felt cool, rough fingers on the back of my neck, yet I refused to look back at the specter. I watched the notebooks burn, hoping that Matthew could feel it as if it were his own flesh. The pages were reduced to ashes. With that, Matthew's shrieks faded away. I snapped. He better be dead for real this time. The cold anger drained slowly from Rami as the ashes fluttered into the wind. After a long, deep sigh, his usual wide grin was back. He's where he belongs. He shouldn't bother you ever again. I took in a deep breath, turning my face up to the sky, savoring the sun on my skin. It's funny. I never appreciated how good it felt until that moment. It was comforting. A breeze gently brushed my hair, the early spring air tasting like heaven. I've promised myself that I would never take my life or my body for granted ever again.